Welcome to my home.
This is your home, huh?
Used to be my home.
Wow.
This is courtesy of Hurricane Ida.
So I assume you're not living here now.
No.
It's been 3 months since Hurricane Ida tore through Janie Luster's home in southern Louisiana, and she's nowhere close to moving back in.
Damages.
Oh my goodness, to walk in here and you're inside, but you're outside, right?
Exactly.
She's an elder in the United Homa Nation, a tribal community of about 17,000 people situated along the coast.
This was the living room
Okay.
that went into the kitchen area. My bedroom's here. That's the only part of the house that's somewhat dry, but you can feel and smell the mildew, the mold.
I mean, just all this water damage, it's hard to fix, right?
Exactly.
So how long do you think it would be, I mean, realistically, before you're back home in here?
At least a year.
From now?
Probably not in here, in something else. I grew up next door, and our people are a coastal people. My mom and dad, trolled the waters, fished the waters, trapped the marsh areas in back here. It's nothing like sitting on the back porch and seeing the bayou.
Ida wasn't the first major storm to hit this part of Louisiana, but it may have been the worst, and its aftermath has left everyone along its path struggling to get back on their feet. Or almost everyone. Down at the very southern tip of the bayou is Port Fouchon, home base for 90% of the Gulf's offshore oil operations. It was hit hard by Ida too, with more than $250 million in damages. But a couple months later, it's up and running.
This was the strongest storm to hit us directly ever in our history.
Chett Chaisson manages the port.
When a devastating hurricane or something happens, you kind of look to something as a light.
Yeah.
And this Lady of the Gulf statue, there was water up to the top of that base here. And then when we came back after, no damage to it at all. It's kind of one of those things, we're going to be okay. You can see these trailers are elevated. They had to redo all their woodwork, their steps and stuff. But at the end of the day,
Oh, so all of the wood here looks new. Is it?
Yeah,
Is it
it's
stuff
all
they've had to
rebuilt.
replace post
it's all stuff
Ida?
they had to rebuild post
okay.
Ida.
But have you managed to recover to a large degree?
9 days after the storm, vessels were beginning to be loaded and heading things back offshore, which, for a Cat 4, potentially Cat 5 storm to hit us directly, I think we did well. In terms of facilities themselves, we're probably at about 80%.
That's pretty good, though.
Absolutely. Ecstatic about that.
Should it be easier for the industry to recover than it is for the average folk? I mean, is that fair?
Industry is what we need to survive in communities. The last thing you need is for people to lose their homes and lose their job. Is it fair that industry gets up and running before people in the community? I don't know if anything's fair.
That's the question facing southern Louisiana these days. Whether anything about its battle with climate change will be fair. The storms here are getting stronger, and the land at the edges of the state is washing away at a rate of a football field every 2 hours. The state says it's approaching the problem head-on with a 50-year, $50 billion program of levees and floodgates and restored wetlands that's one of the most ambitious climate change projects in the nation. But one of its main priorities is to preserve the working coast, almost all of which is oil and gas. And the plan, like the economy of the state itself, is hugely dependent on that industry. Oil and gas fines and fees provide 2/3 of its funding. For researchers like Scott Eustace, this means the very industry most responsible for climate change has undue influence over how it's being managed.
State agencies have implemented billions and billions in wetland and island restoration. So the state isn't inactive. That program looks at the sea level rise numbers honestly and decides where to spend billions in infrastructure dollars. And it does it on a science basis.
Sounds good.
Sounds good, but we've got this industry that is the vast majority of our politics. Most of the people writing laws are invested in oil and gas, whether directly, they're executives of a company. Some of them are employees of a company. Others are large landowners that have a large land interest. It seems like we're talking out of both sides of our mouths. There will be an economy at the end of the road of Louisiana for decades to come. It's just, will that economy contribute to the storms, or will it save us from them, is the question in my mind.
The job of navigating all this belongs to Charles Sutcliffe, the governor's top climate resiliency officer.
Is there a contradiction in trying to say we accept the reality of what climate change means for the coast, and also we're going to preserve this working coast and all that means for industry? I mean, are those two kind of in conflict?
They are definitely intertwined. Offshore oil and gas revenues are one of our major funding streams to build levee systems in Louisiana.
Right. Is that a problem?
Well, it's the world that we have. You know, it's putting people to work and it's creating revenues that we're able to invest back in our coast. I think that there is a risk that we become over-dependent on these kinds of the old economy to kind of fuel our adaptation, to kind of fund our adaptation efforts.
I mean, you use that language, but also it's not an accident that's also
No.
the very industry. We're not talking about a steel mill. We're talking about the very industry that in some ways is most at fault for the problem that we're facing right now.
So I think that contradiction isn't lost on anybody. This problem is huge, and this problem is going to be with us beyond a 50-year planning horizon of the master plan. It's going to be with us as long as we want to stay in Louisiana. We're going to have to be managing the coast and the rivers and the ecosystem, as well as providing protection for people. So that's our reality.
The reality for people like Janie Luster and her community is potentially more bleak. The state has already begun relocating some coastal communities in places too exposed to storms and land loss, starting with the Isle of Jean Charles in 2016.
When is it too much? When is it too many storms? You have to start talking about whether this is even a place that anyone can live.
Well, I know with Jean Charles Island, they started talking about relocation of the tribes several years back, and they finally did buy land to relocate the people. The older people, they don't want to move.
Do you think that could happen here?
Possibility, possibility. I can remember they said in 50 years when I was young, it's not going to be here anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It's still here,
Mm-hmm.
Now, I do look at my children with this hurricane. Even my daughter Ann had looked to relocate in Alabama to get away, not to put her children through what they went, the loss of the home and everything. So she had actually considered that, but her heart wasn't in it. When people are talking about leaving, one of the first things that comes to my mind is, how do you preserve the culture? This is home to me. It's been home to my parents and grandparents. I'm planning on holding out until the day I close my eyes.
What is the Homa Nation? What's the tribe story?
Somewhat a sad one for the fact that we've been waiting for federal recognition for so long, going through federal recognition for about 30 years now. Now I say about 40 years.
How does it affect you, in the aftermath of a hurricane? How does not having federal recognition affect you?
Well, if we had federal recognition, our tribe would be handling our situations, getting us what we needed as far as housing, that they could plan ahead for the fact that we are coastal people. We know that it's going to happen again. Mm-hmm. And so you could set money aside for housing, especially for situations like this.
And so without it, everyone's on their own, essentially?
Exactly. And I think people are threatened with our federal recognition, from the oil field to politicians, and they shouldn't be. Maybe the oil companies would be afraid that we would want the land back. But, if we got federal recognition, we could buy our land where we want it,
Right.
More than services, the recognition to acknowledge that we are Indian people, that we are the Homa people that we've always said that we have been. My dad and my mom both were Homa. Nothing else, Homa. And for the government, we as an Indian people, not only my tribe, but we're the only ones that have to prove who we are. How can that be right? We have to have a tribal roll number to say we are indigenous people.
Mm-hmm.
Le premier monde, or the first people. My parents passed away waiting for federal recognition, and I can remember my dad saying that he didn't think it was going to happen in his time. And here I am saying the same thing.